Wow. Thank you for that introduction, Stephen. You honor me so. You honor me so, and I just love you and Deborah. And I got to tell y'all, I was supposed to speak last fall at this meeting, and I totally got my time zones messed up. And so I apologize to anybody that was here. And so it just, when it happens, I called Polly. By the way, Polly Pistol is my sponsor, and I called her freaking out. She goes, "Oh, honey, I've done that before. I can't get all this stuff straight." Anyway, because I was just so upset. And um, I want to thank Stephen for asking me to talk. I love seeing my sister in sobriety here, Miss Suzanne, and seeing other friends of mine and new friends. Um, I'm Hilary Roberts. I'm an alcoholic. I have been sober since May 9th of 1997, and I'm very grateful for that. I just told you my sponsor's name. I have a home group. Um, when I'm in Texas, I go to the Chicago group in Dallas, Texas. And then when I'm in Orange County, because I was in LA and I was doing Pacific group a lot, but now I'm in Orange County. So I get to visit PG sometimes, but I go to the Canyon Club too over there. So um, I'm just really, really grateful to be here. And also, we do a book study online for when I'm traveling. I do it on Monday nights at 6 o'clock, and it's co-ed, and we just do the book line by line. That's a lot of fun too. So if you want that information, I can give that to you. I this book, I've been highlighting this big book since I was 15 years of age. And something jumped out at me the other day that just blew my mind. I had never seen it before. And this book does this to me. You think you've read it, and I was raised old school AA, where you have to take one marker, go through, you got to look up the words with the 1935 dictionary, then you get another marker when you get to the end. You ask the questions. And I was trying, I may jump around a little bit here, but my father is like religiously atheist. And I thought, what is wrong with him? He's been just crazy. And there's a place in our book, and it says some of us have been violently anti-religious. I just saw that the other day. So if you have a hard time with some people that are really mad about it, I've never seen that line in all the years. So what I want to tell you is that my story might be worse than yours. My story might be not as bad as yours, but I can tell you I'm an alcoholic, not because of how I was raised or the things that I went through. I am alcoholic because when I take the drink takes me. And I end up in places I don't want to be, with people I don't want to be with, and I do things that I swore I'd never do or never do again. And I do that over and over and over again, unless I can have the psychic change that our beautiful book, Alcoholics Anonymous, talks about having. And it took me a long time to get willing to take all 12 steps all the way through. I was gifted growing up with good hair and good voice. I discovered I had a singing voice at 10 years of age, and I'll tell you more of that later. But I can tell you, I had everything offered to me from a very young age. And I was flown to New York at 19 years of age. I was 5.5 months dry in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. I had a sponsor in name only. And we were at the Palladium Club, and they said, "Hey, would you like a glass of champagne?" And I'm like, no, 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 I'm sober. And they're like, "Oh, come on, it's just champagne." And I thought, well, it's only the outside issues that got me. So I took that drink. Now, that night wasn't the worst. But the next day, when we were to meet all the executives and the gal took me to the restaurant with a bar, I walk up to the bar and I start ordering kamikazes and backing them with Long Island iced teas. And all I remember are the shadows in the doorway, and I had pulled the table over onto myself. And I was at her house the next day in the same clothes. I wasn't staying with her, and I had done a sundry amount of things to myself, with a note and a ticket laying next to me on the floor, not in a bed. And it said, "Call us when you grow up." And I didn't do that one time. I didn't do that 2 times. I didn't do that 3 times. I ruined 4 major record deals and that's what I wanted to do with all my heart is I wanted to sing. I wanted to be an entertainer.
Hmm.
But see, again, an alcoholic of my type, once I start, I cannot guarantee when I'm going to stop. And I see these other people drinking with impunity, and I want to drink like that, and I cannot do it. And I end up, I finally, when I was introduced to alcohol, I started drinking at 14 and a half. I was introduced. And that first time I did 9 shots of tequila with those girls. I did 9 shots of tequila, and I was never going to drink. And those big girls came out with that bottle, and they're like, Hilary, you want to join us? And more than anything, I wanted to be a part of. And I'm like, well, yes, I do. And so I'm coughing as they're giving it to me and trying to take those shots. But 8, 9 shots later, it was like, bam, I felt the holy spigot. It was done. And I, when I had walked in that place before the drink, I had this brain that wouldn't shut up. And it just knew what you were thinking about me. It knew it wasn't good. You could see that I was ugly. You could see that I was unlovable. You could see that I didn't fit in. And I had a cannon-sized blast inside my gut, and I just could not, it's like I just couldn't take a breath. I just couldn't take a breath. And those 8, 9 shots later, it was like, bam, this up here is quiet, and that anxiety hole just sealed up. And I thought, you know what? These girls were smart to invite me to their little shindig. and secondly, you know what? I think I could teach them how to like get a little rhythm and learn how to dance, because I had been taught how to dance. And another thing, I thought, I can conquer so many things. I started thinking, well, maybe I'm really kind of cute. See, I had grown up going to inner city schools where I was a minority, and I hated my pale skin. I hated my freckles. I hated my name. So I went by different names, and I was ashamed of that you could see my veins through my skin, all this crazy stuff. But when I took that drink that day, I thought, I'm not pale. My skin is alabaster. And I might look like Anne Margaret. And I just, I used to watch those old movies. And I used to think fantasy was my first escape. And I used to think, I'm going to find a man. We're going to trot along the road together. He's going to lay his jacket down for me, and we're going to sing off into the sunset. We're going to have kids and grandkids like my grandparents on my mother's side did, and then we're going to die on the same day. And I can tell you that's not what happened. But some of the things that happened to me growing up is that I was sexually abused and tortured starting at age 3 and into my adolescent years by different perpetrators, including in the church. And, people that are abused already think that it's their fault. And one of the ones was my best friend's dad, and he was taken to court for molesting 3 12-year-old girls. And the courts gave him a year probation, and they sent my mother $2.99 restitution for harm done. And I was angry. Now, again, I have met people that have been abused that never became alcoholic. And then you have my sponsor that had the exact childhood that I thought I should have grown up with parents that cherished her, with going to the same schools, all the things that she was never abused, yet she became alcoholic because when she takes the drink takes her, and she ends up doing all the things that we do. And when I learned about that, because I always thought if you had a childhood like mine, you would drink like me too. And I grew up, my parents, my mom was come here, go away kind of mom. She'd really love you, and then she'd be gone. And then she even left for a few years. My father was a rageaholic. I already told you, he's a self-righteous atheist. Very abusive situation. It was just, and when I discovered that I could sing, which is when I saw the play Annie, I wanted to be Annie so bad I started singing Tomorrow every single day, driving everybody crazy. And so I was singing Tomorrow every day. And I started doing talent shows and commercials, and and singing in the playhouse, the dinner playhouses, and I got just about every part that I auditioned for. But it was to escape me. It was because I had to go back to being Hilary. Another thing that happened was that I ended up dropping out of school after repeating the eighth grade. I didn't quite make it through the eighth grade the second time, and I was very smart growing up, but by seventh and eighth grade, I just couldn't deal with everything going on. And one of the things that I resented my dad about so much was the fact that when I told him finally what was going on around that person that got let off, I felt my best friend's dad, he told me he didn't believe me and that I was a drama queen, and and that I just wanted attention. And so I had all these devastations. And so discovering alcohol, really it was my solution. And I wanted to feel that way for the rest of my life. And I nearly died trying. I can tell you I was 14 and a half when I took my first drink. I was 15 when I was put into treatment the first time. And I said everything they wanted to hear. I was very angry. And when I got out, I went back to the same playmates, playpens, all of that, and I ended up drinking again. And I remember working for minimum wage at different places, and I was working at a Dairy Queen, and these people came in and they said they could help my singing career. And one thing led to another. I was taken out of state and trafficked, and I was able to escape that after 2 months. And he'd beaten up his so-called wife, and I made up a story that the FBI was looking for me, that my mom and dad were talking. Well, they weren't talking. They've been divorced since I was 2, and he could have just, I didn't think about that. He could have just put me 6 feet under, but he said, "Get out of my face. You're not worth it," because he was worried about me being underage and taking me across state lines. So, the thing is that I already felt dirty. And when a person is abused, and I wouldn't talk about being abused till I was 12 years sober. I just couldn't. I still had a lot of stuff to deal with on that. And I talk about that. For some people, they get drunk on the golf course. For some people, it's in their closet. For me, this is just my story and how it unfolded. These are my causes and conditions, so to speak, of my resentments and my fears. And so I can tell you that once I had been trafficked and I'd almost died over and over again, jumping out of cars and all that. But then it was like, who's going to love me now? What good man is going to love me now? What nice lady is going to be my friend? And so then I acted accordingly. And I started trafficking myself, and I started working in clubs where you didn't have to wear much, and going, and then I would try to get sober again. And the thing is that I would never take the steps all the way through. I'd get to step 4, I'd get mad at me, I'd get mad at you, and then I'd go back out and drink. I'd look in the big book and it would say, "Did not we set the ball rolling?" Let's not ask a sponsor about it. Let's just say, because I'm like, I didn't get myself, raped out there. I didn't do all these things. And I'd shut the door again, shut the book, go drink. And it was just this in and out, in and out, in and out. And the people would ask me, "How long do you have today, Hilary?" And I'd be like, "Just for today, just for today." And it was a very, very painful time. And I can tell you, my best thinking had me going in and out of this program for 13 years, 5 treatment centers and 8 detoxes. And that was, when I first came to you, I thought I was too young, too cute, and too smart for this deal. And by the time I got to you, I thought I wasn't even worth being under somebody's shoe. And when I got to you, I'm about 125 right now. I was 93 pounds. I was all sunken in. My skin was all green. It was just gross. And I'd been picking at it because I don't know about y'all, but they talks about our co-founders, and they found him with alcohol and sedatives. Well, they found me with alcohol and repetitives. And so I would stay up for days at a time, and I'd be drinking. And I sprinkled all kinds of stuff on that. I knew I was an alcoholic for a very long time. I knew, and I would cry. I'd cry out to God, and I would read my big book, and I'd be in the big book, and I'd beg God to get me sober. And I just, and then I'm like, okay, I just am going to have two. It was always back to the two. And I wouldn't call before I drank. That was the other thing. If there was a 0.5 step to give to any new person, it would be call before you drink. I was famous at going to the meetings and sobbing about what I had done. And on that note, I want to say something that, I love if you're new that you're here and you just jump in and get in the middle of our herd and do this deal. But if you've got time, and you've started doing something that isn't good for your recovery, or you've stopped doing some things that are good for your recovery, please grab somebody. We don't want to lose you. Last year, we lost two people with 40 years. 40 years. And, also concerning medication, to have people that we're accountable to. And I've been through several surgeries. I had open heart surgery, and I had a 50% chance of surviving at 14 years sober. And I had my doctor talking to my sponsor and two other people that I was accountable to. And they fed me that. And the thing is, if you get sawed open, I'm sorry, you're gonna, fortunately for me, I really didn't have to take much, because they took me off the hard stuff after a day and a half, and they had given me some stuff later, but I didn't need to take any of it. I was on Advil and Tylenol. But that's not always the case. There's other surgery that I've had from my traumas that I had to put me on some stuff, and I had to have it fed to me. And I had 3 AAs, my sponsor and my doctor, all together. Because I don't want it to, I was never a pill addict, but you know what? I don't want it to come in the back door. I don't want to lose this. Man, I remember, you want to talk, you want to talk about how you never know how you're going to help somebody. I remember I was totally whacked out. I was in a hotel room in Denver, Colorado, which is where I'm from. And a lady had said, because I told her, I think I'm going to Texas. I was going to go down and visit with a friend of mine. And she said, look up the Preston group. She said, look up that Preston group. I'm going to back up because I'm jumping around way too much, you guys. I'm sorry. I haven't been sleeping well a lot lately. It's just for some of you, my sponsor's husband, Dave Pistol, passed away. And I didn't sleep much because we walked that out with him. We're going to visit, and it was beautiful and painful and spiritual. And I got to be there for almost 2 weeks. And but my brain's a little scattered right now because it was just a lot. He was like a spiritual father to me. So forgive my scatteredness is what I'm saying. So I remember, I'm going in and out, in and out. I build things up, I tear them down. And then this girl, I remember, I used to work in the organic health stores because I'm going to get pure for going back into the meetings because I'd been drinking too much. And then I'd end up in the hospital, clean myself up with some vitamins, go work out. I'd walk in the meeting, pretend that I'd been sober a while. I'd be like, just for today, always that just for today garbage. And I remember I finally, I came down to Texas for just a few days. I was going to stay to visit, and I came with my friend, and she had 12-stepped me. I had gone back in that darn club, gone back in because I'd hawked half my stuff. So I'm back working at the strip bars, and she used to pass out drunk in the corner. And I used to tell her, you need to control your drinking. And so she, one day I walk in there after, losing it again and getting fired from another regular job. And she's smiling. And I said, my gosh, girl, what's with you? And she said, well, I've got 6 months sober in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I said, how in the world do you have that? And she said, well, I've been going to meetings, and I said, how do you have that working here is what I'm trying to ask you. And she said, well, on page 100 of my book, it says if I have a good business reason to be here, which I do, I'm here to make money. And I was shocked but interested. So she said, hey, I'm moving to Texas. You want to come down and visit for a few days? And we're going to go down there and check stuff out. And I'm like, yeah, I'd love to go. So I went down there, down here. And the thing that I used to do is always pretend that everything was okay. I would never let you too close to me. Can't let you too close to me because I don't trust you. And I walked in that Preston group, and Preston group in Dallas, Texas is kind of like the Beverly Hills of Dallas. And so I'm walking in there in one of my outfits, if you want to call it that. And I'm walking down the hallway in those heels, Payless heels with the nail, because they're all worn out, I've got 2 outfits only, and they're not outfits. And I walk in that meeting, and I made a decision. You don't have to change cities to do this. And I thought, I just don't care what they think anymore. And they asked for burning desires, which I absolutely always loved the burning desires. And I said, I hate you, I hate God, I hate me, and I hate AA, and I don't want to hear about it after the meeting. And they keep coming back. And I was like, yeah. And I would be flipping them off in the meeting. And and they try to get me to pray with them, and I'm like, don't touch me. I don't pray to that effing thing in the sky. He's nothing but a demented maniac, and I would share in those burning desires times every day at noon. And when I couldn't sleep, which was almost all the time, I would go to the early morning meeting and let them have it too. And so I'd have these burning desires, and I'd start cursing. I cursed like a sailor, I was dressed like a stripper, and little old ladies would leave the room. People would get up and walk out. And then I started interviewing for sponsors. And I thought, if they've been sober longer than I've been attending Alcoholics Anonymous, that's my gal. Well, I settled on a gal. She would not be interviewed, and she was sober since '86. So I said, okay, she'll do. And the reason I picked her, she would sit in meetings, and she had this peace about her. She could sit in her own skin. And anytime a woman would leave the meeting crying, it didn't matter what age, what size, what sexual preference, what God, what no God, didn't matter. She would chase her out of the meeting and go help her. And I called her one night at 3:00 in the morning. She didn't answer, but I left a message. And the next day I went up to her and I said, I'm so sorry I called. She says, no, you keep calling me. And I remembered that. It was okay, because I was tweaked out by some kind of song or something that came into my head, and I just wanted to drink. That's the thing. But I remember I was in Dallas a week, and I had stayed sober a week. And when I got that week sober, which I hadn't had in a year and a half, I stayed. And I had clothes. I had a car. My clothes were in the back of this car that was a mess. It was wrecked, of course. And I just left everything there. I left it all. I had a feeling that I was going to die soon. I had almost died over and over and over and over and over again. But I had this sense that I did not have long to go on this planet. I don't know why. I had horrible cravings my first 6 months of sobriety. Horrible, like a vampire to blood. So I have this sponsor, and she knew how crazy I was. And she said, okay, here's the deal. If I'm going to sponsor you, this is what's going to happen. You're going to call me every single day. You're going to call 3 women a day. You're going to ask them, how do you stay sober today? That's all you can ask them. You're going to go to the meeting after the meeting, which was the coffee house or the restaurant, and you're going to ask those old timers, how do you stay sober today? And that's all you can ask. When you come to the meeting, because I'd get up 4 or 5 times, go in and out. She's like, you can get up on the meeting when they're clapping. You can return into the meeting when they're clapping for somebody, but you're not to get up while someone is sharing. You want to get a soda pop and bring it in here? She says, you're to open it before you walk back in the door. You want to get in the vending machine and get something? I want you to open the bag and quietly slide the things out while people are talking. You don't, while people are sharing. We didn't have cell phones back then. We had pay phones, and we had the phone at the club. And let me tell you, I promise you, like I'm a cell phone caller outer. I really am because I know I already know what my spot. The phone goes night night. My phone stays in my purse. I do not take it out during the meeting. That even though I have one today, so but on my girls, I'm a phone caller outer. I'm like, unless you're an emergency room doctor, you do not need to be on that on call, or unless somebody's expecting a baby. So, um, so she would tell me that. The other thing I said, do you want me to quit my job? She said, other people made you quit your job. I'm not going to make you quit your job. She said, if you come do these 12 steps with us all the way through, which you've never done, and you don't drink no matter what, she says, I know if God doesn't want you working there, you won't be working there. She said, you're going to get on your knees in the morning and you're going to pray to the God of your misunderstanding and you're going to thank him at night. And I'm like, do I have to call it God? She says, I don't care what you call it. I said, good. I'm going to call it MFSOB. And that's what I would do. I'd pray with two fingers in the air and I'd call it MFSOB. And I'd be like, keep me sober. No, please. And then I'd be like, thank you at night. I don't know why I said thank you and not please in the morning. But then she said, what I want you to do is I want you to read no more than 2 paragraphs of the big book. You know it better than I do, and you can quote it from here, because I had studied Joe and Charlie tapes. I had been around some amazing AA. She said, but you're not sober and I am. So you're going to read 2 paragraphs a day and you're going to ask yourself, how am I like this? How does this relate to me? And you're going to read it with your heart, not your head. And you're going to ask me any questions. And of course, she had me look up the definitions. And so I had to start getting lots of women's numbers. The other thing I had to do, because I think I got her at about 2 weeks sober, and she said, you're to give your number to anybody with less time than you. A woman with 2 days comes in, you're going to give her your number. And so I had to start giving my number out. And the other thing that she would do is we would go see step speakers, and she had her girls, and she was a caterer, and she also was a cat rescuer. So she had like 10 cats at her house, and it was like 60 degrees, so it's freezing. So she'd lure us over there with cookie dough and cookies, and then we'd all pile in her car and we'd go to hear these amazing speakers. And so we were taken to see John Allred, Reno John. We were taken to see Lucy Harris back in the day, Jim Williams, who was big here in Texas. We'd go see Cersei. I mean, these amazing speakers. And that's what I was raised in here. I remember doing the first step with her. I knew that I was powerless and I knew my life was unmanageable. But I just didn't have a solution. So I wrote down the powerless and unmanageability. You already heard what my concept of step 2 was. And I wasn't going to pick a doorknob, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Well, my first power greater than myself was the group of drunks. And I was ordered to answer the phone at 30 days sober. I was ordered. I didn't want to. And we got a hot one. A woman was calling about another woman, and I got an old timer with 6 years who had a car. I didn't have a car. I had to catch the bus almost my first 9.5 months of sobriety. And we went to this house that was in the Beverly Hills of AA, but the minute we got inside the door, it was a trash pit, and it was stinky food, all this stuff, beer bottles. We tried to get them both in the car, but we got the scrawny one in there. And these women were probably 50, but looked about 75. We got her in the car, and she's crying, and I'm holding on to her. And we get all the way to the Preston group. And the old Preston group, we had a long hallway that you had to walk down. And Kurt, bless his heart, the secretary of the group, was making a concoction so she wouldn't go into the DTs. And it took us 45 minutes to get down that hallway, because we'd go a few steps and she'd start crying her eyes out. And she'd say, I can't do it. And I'm like, I know you're scared, but I'm with you and we can do this. And we go a few more steps and then she'd stop again. And I got to tell you, so here I am, and I'm having nightmares every night of my abuses and the faces of living on the streets. I have this brain that won't shut up, and I have that cannon blast, and I'm craving like crazy. But during that time of helping my fellow sufferer, I had none of it. And as I'm going down that hallway, these old timers that would get up and leave the meeting were looking at me with a different look. It was like, hmm. And they'd come by and they'd pat me on my back and they'd say, good job. And I knew that I wanted to feel that way, because I was like, I was like just a terrified person acting out, lashing out. And we got her down, and I was ordered to go get her cigarettes, and I did, and I just had so much pride in that. And our literature talks about that even the newest of newcomer can help their fellow sufferer. Later on, I think I was still cussing in the meetings, and this old timer called me down in the meeting, and he's like, young lady, you're just too pretty to be talking that way. And secondly, that's no language for that language is no place for a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'm like, if you don't like the way I talk, you can put me in your 4-step. And secondly, I don't listen to any man in the program. And then they're offering the desired chip, and he's walking around. And I'm sitting next to this other redhead that used to laugh like an opera singer. And she had 10 years. And I'm like, who in the blank does he think he is? And he walks around the corner. I'm like, who made you God today? And he said, young lady, one day you're going to thank me. And I'm like, I said, I'm not before I hit you. And so they're dragging me out because the 93-pound newcomer is going to beat the 32-year old timer, acting like a fool. And that was on a Friday. I had lost my singing voice. And I had to go to the doctor on Monday. And I found out that on Monday, my sponsor called me. She said, Bruce made amends to the group, that the only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. Now, I've been coming around Alcoholics Anonymous since 1984. We are pigeons, peons, take the cotton out of your ear, stick it in your mouth. I've never heard an old timer make amends to a newcomer, ever, or about a newcomer. And she said, that means he's going to make amends to you. And the only thing you're to do is say thank you. I don't want you to explain how you began the art of cussing and go on and on and on. So the next day he pulled me aside and he said, young lady, I just want to tell you I was wrong for what I said, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, thank you. But let me tell you what happened to me. Let me tell you what happened. Immediately I go into the meeting and I want to start covering up. And I'm like, and then I go, shoot, fudge, darn. He became like this guru to me, and I wanted to make him proud of me. And this is Bruce L. And he and his wife became my friends, and he and I used to have lunch all the time with him and the old timers. But then sometimes we'd have it together, and he'd be like, well, did you do well at work last night? I'm like, oh, Bruce, I don't want to talk about that because I hated my job. But we became close friends. And do you know that he asked me for his 45 years to give him his chip at our meeting. And I can tell you, a year and a half after I'd been here, the little old ladies that would get up, they stopped getting up because my language changed. And that was through love. And I can tell you, May, who got sober at 85 and was sober for the last 13 years of her life, she was one of the ones that would get up and leave. And a year and a half after I was sober, she came over to me and she said, you've changed so much, baby, and I'm so proud of you. So I'm taking these steps. I hate God. She said, if you could have any God you want, what would it be? And I said, okay, Spons, I want like what the book talks about. I want to feel the nearness of our Creator. I want to know what it's like to take a shower and feel clean, because I can take 20 and I still feel dirty. I want to know what it's like to not want to drink so bad it hurts. I want to know what it's like to laugh from my gut. I want to know what it's like to look in the mirror and to be able to stand the sight looking back at me, because right now I just can't stand the ugly creature looking back at me. And I could just barely put my mascara on. I want to be able to go outside and hear the birds and see the butterflies. I want to know what is grateful. And I don't want to be able to, I want to be able to sit through a meeting that's on the topic of acceptance because I hate it. and and I just want to feel like I'm okay in my own skin, and I want my brain to shut up. She said, that's perfect. That's perfect, baby. Now we're going to get launched off. And she held my hand and we got on our knees and we did that third step prayer. And it was so weird for her. She just put her arm around me and stuff. It made me cringe. And it's just because I felt so unlovable, felt so yuck, you know? So we launched off into that 4-step. She showed, and at the top of every page I had to write, God, show me the truth. God, show me the truth. And I had to list everything I was mad at first. Everything, every person, place, principles, politics, whatever it was, everything. And then I had to write out the cause. And then I had to write out what if it affected. Was it my pocketbook? Was it my self-esteem? Was it my security? Was it my ambition? Was it my personal relationship? Was it my personal sex relations? I wrote it all out. And she said, and then when it came for the 4th column, she said, here's the deal. Your mom leaving you, that's not your fault, but I want to know what you did do that was dishonest. And I want you to ask yourself the questions in that 4th column. Now, when it comes to your abusers, you have no part in that. So you're to leave that blank. We're going to talk about that when we do your 5th step. And you don't have any part in your dad's rage or violence. You have no part in that. And but you have a part because you did steal from him and you lied to him at different times. You have a part in some things. And you're going to have to, you know, this is your life we're talking about. If I'm waiting for them to change, I can never get well. You know, our big book could be called Grow Up because it teaches us how to do that. It teaches us how to grow up. So I wrote everything down and then I got the fears out and I had a whole lot of them, that evil corroding thread. And then we got to the sex and I just, some of it, it was just faces from the streets, you know? And I called her and I'm freaking out and I'm like, what do I write? She says, you write what you remember, baby. We'll get it all in there. It's okay. Because I was scared I was going to do it wrong again and go back out. And I didn't want to go back out. Even though I wanted to drink real bad, I didn't want to go back out. So I wrote it all down and then I got a big bag of M&Ms and I went to that 60-degree house and and then she's like, she got all the cats settled. And we did the prayer before we started. And as I'm reading off everything, she's writing down in my sponsorship line, they write down my amends that I'm to be making. And we got through and I'm telling her all this stuff. And she said, baby, she said, you don't have a part with your mama leaving. You don't have a part with what your daddy, with your, you know, your daddy not believing you or him raging out or him getting physical or any of those things. She says, but every time you walk in that club, baby, you're perpetrating that abuse and you're cutting on your soul. She says, I love you very much, but that's what you're doing by staying in that environment. And she says, I love you so much. I want to tell you the truth. That's what I'm here to do, is tell you the truth. And she said, and you're not going to like what I'm going to tell you about the abuser. She's like, you're going to have to pray for them. You're going to have to pray for them. And maybe eventually get some outside help. And, you know, when I finished that 5th step, it wasn't like the clouds parted and everything. But what happened was this one person knew every nook and cranny of my life. And so every time she walked in a meeting, I felt safe. I felt somebody loved me no matter what. Do you know that woman, let me look at my time. There were some women giving me a real hard time and told me that because I had done other things, which I respected the traditions, but they were like, they were just gossips. And, you know, we're not all here because we're all there, you know? And her dad belonged to the Dallas Country Club. And she said, ladies, I'd like to take you to lunch. These 3 particular ladies. I wouldn't call them ladies at that time, but whatever. She took them all to lunch. She put on her finest because normally she was into her catering stuff. That's what she did, catering and cats. That's what she loved. So she was pretty casual all the time. And you wouldn't know that her dad belonged to a country club. She took them all to lunch. She sat them down. She said, in the middle of the Dallas Country Club, Hilary's my girl. And I am sick of you messing with her. And you're to leave her, probably with a whole lot of colorful words, alone. You mess with her, you're going to mess with me. Well, let me tell you what, they never mess with me again. And then somebody stood up and protected me. Somebody protected me. So then, she sent me home with those first 5 proposals. Then we get into step 6 and 7. I had to do the 7-step prayer. She says, if you could get rid of your defects, baby, you wouldn't need God. So you got to start praying about that. And then she said, I know you don't want to make amends to your dad, so you're going to pray for the willingness to be willing to make amends to him. And I did. And I finally did make the amends. And he added a whole lot to it, including calling me a psychopath and all this stuff. And I just shut my mouth and I walked out. And I called her and I felt a little freer. And I got to tell you, that's when the beginning of the promises began to happen. I paid off creditors over the amount of 10 years, tens of thousands of dollars, just a little bit every month. I got to tell you. So the other thing was, she said, what, I said, after a year and a half, my singing voice would not come back. And I had taken rounds of steroids, I had speech therapy. They didn't want to cut on my cords. Vocal cords. They were afraid it would change it. She's like, why don't you ask God to bring your voice back if it's his will? And I'm like, God, 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 God. Everything you say is God. And she said, that's right. And see, our deal was I didn't have to like it. I just got to do it, right? I get to take the action. I can hate it all I want while I'm doing it, as long as I'm doing it. And so I just started doing the prayer. And, within 3 months, my voice started coming back. And then you all, even though you knew, I was working at Brooks Brothers, but working one night a month at that stupid club. And I was leaving crying. I hated it, but I wouldn't let it go. Those old ideas and the survival things are so hard sometimes to let go. So, and I'm praying to God, please get me out of this job, even though I'm not leaving it, right? And you guys start asking me to sing for your weddings. And I'm like, don't you guys know where I work? They're like, oh, Hilary, we know you. I was celibate for 2 years. I was celibate. I'm probably the only celibate stripper that ever walked this earth. Anyway, so, and then I started singing for the public. And I'm doing weddings and parties and some funerals. Those are very hard. And then I ended up going in the club one night. It was a Friday night. There was a bachelor party that came in, and they were a few years older than me, good looking, and I danced all night for them. The next day I had a wedding. And the same bachelor party was the wedding party. And I thought, okay, God, you can kill me now. And so I go and I'm like, oh my gosh. And I sing my few little songs and I'm waiting to get paid. And they all start walking over to me. And they're like, we were talking about you last night. I said, I'm sure you were today too. And they said, no, we were there too. I'm like, no, it's a double standard. Don't start with me. And they said, but no, we didn't understand why you were there because you didn't fit. You didn't fit. We couldn't understand it. But then we hear you today and you're really good at this and you fit doing this. And do you know that I never had to walk back in that club again? Because that's where God goes. That's where God goes. I just have a few minutes to tell you some amazing things. I started sponsoring women, doing 12-step calls. I still do that. I do that spot check inventory. Through the steps, in step 3, it became Dear Blank instead of calling him names. In step 7, it became Dear HP. In step 9, it became Dear God. And in step 11, it became Dear Heavenly Father. Our 12th step talks about having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, not a result. That is the result. And so I was able to go back to college. I can tell you that if you get good sleep and you get a educational sponsor called a tutor, and you study, you can get A's and A pluses. It's amazing. I can tell you that God has taken me places with my career that have blown my mind. I was able, one of the most beautiful things that happened that was unexpected. Polly became my sponsor in 2004. My sponsor got very sick, and And I was able to make amends face to face to an abuser. It wasn't planned. And I can't tell you the whole story right now, but I can tell you about it later if you want to call me. But it was unexpected and it just happened. And I walked out of there free. And I walked out of there free. Um, I used to date narcissists. I used to date abusive men in the program up until about 20 years sober. And I would, you know, it was everything I grew up in, where it was the physical, the emotional, sexual, financial, so many things. And nice guys wanted to date me. It's just, I was comfortable with what I knew. And so that was I was suicidal at 20 years with that. And Polly and I dug deep, and I found out that I still had a core belief that I didn't deserve a good man, a respectful man. Um, at 6 years sobriety, I had to get outside help. I had to get outside help in all this. But I walked out of there because at that time I was being very successful in my career, and yet I was still dating abusive people. But that has been lifted for me now. I'm engaged to the most beautiful man who would never think of bucking up on me or trying to take my money or, you know, or scare me or force me into doing anything I didn't want to do. He's amazing. And we're getting married in September, and I'm so excited about it. And the greatest gifts I've been given, and I'm going to wrap it up now. These are the greatest gifts. Not all that other stuff is icing on top, but the greatest gifts is that I look in the mirror today and I see a precious daughter of a most loving God, loving and merciful God. I take a shower, baby, and I'm just washing off a little dirt. I'm already clean from the inside out. I go outside and I can hear the birds and I see the butterflies. Do you know my license plate says yay? Today I am a grateful alcoholic woman, and I have a peace that passes all understanding most of the time. I am in menopause, so sometimes that is challenged. And I had frozen eggs to save to be with when I did my heart surgery. I survived that at a 50% chance, and I had a burning bush experience with that. But I froze my eggs, and last year I thawed them because I found the love of my life, and it didn't work out of 29 eggs. And you know what? The women, Sharon Crane, and the women at the Monday Night Daily Reflections meeting carried me, and they loved me through that, and that was okay. And acceptance sometimes takes a while, and we're looking at other options now. I wasn't ready to hear about that yet. But today I'm in the middle of the herd. I feel like I have the secret to life, and I just pray that I get to die being busy in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous with 5/9/97 being my sobriety date. That is my number one goal through everything, in sickness and health, no matter what. You're stuck with me, and I pray to God I stay stuck with you. Thank you.